The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here on a Tuesday. I hope everyone has had a good start to the week. And, right before the show started, technically as the intro is rolling, Casey asked a very important question. What was that important question you asked, Casey?
I pointed out that quite literally everything that we said on that intro, that I think I made maybe 6 months ago, maybe even further than that, has come true. The Browns are the worst team in the league. 2024 season for all of our teams is pretty much over. Lamar Jackson deserves MVP. Isn't going to get MVP.
Certainly in the hunt.
But
we'll see how the playoff success goes.
Yeah, we'll see. And then I think Drew Sample is the most important piece on that.
Certainly
Bengals
a focal
offense.
point.
I mean, every time he gets the ball, we score on that following couple drives or a couple plays of that.
I think we just score independently, but yeah, that works.
Yeah, and then Joe Burrow, he also deserves MVP, and Kenner wishes he was on the Browns. So
Whoa. I do. I got nothing.
If we just went halvesies and threw that Browns defense with the Bengals offense, we might have a Super Bowl for Ohio.
But how about that Drew Sample take, though? I mean, come on. He's not even here to defend himself. But we're off and rolling. We're getting a little baseball. The Reds, they're in on another big name.
Yeah, they are.
And at some point.
That's the thing about the Reds. They're always in on them.
That's right.
They're always interested.
That's right. This was a fun list because the Reds share so many similarities with the rest of the teams they were listed
the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox. Yeah, it's right around.
Every team other than the Reds on that final six had an offer above $650 million on the table for Juan Soto.
Tough. Tough. Listen, but I commend them for trying. They're trying.
A
for effort. That's right.
Yeah, and like
that banner's going to look so sick. Finish top 5 for like 6 players this offseason.
Yeah, it is.
If we put a roster together of who the Reds could have had based on the activity in the offseason, the Reds, I think, would be the favorite to win the whole thing.
Their win total, if they hit on everything they were linked to so far, would be mid-90s.
I'm a little disappointed that they didn't even try for Soto, to be honest. Like, at this point, you might as well have just throw your hat in the ring. I mean, the Pirates basically did. But
we really gonna promote that? Pirates were in on Soto. How much do you believe in that?
Yeah, probably not.
But we'll get to that coming up. Fangraphs put out their projected top 100 Major League Baseball players for 2025. 3 Reds make the list. It's not the Reds that are on the list that surprised me, but maybe the order, I guess, and we'll get to that coming up around the corner. We touched on it lightly yesterday. Carson Palmer had some interesting things to say about his concerns about Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, as if it's the first time we've heard about his concerns about Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. But we do have a soundbite from that we'll dive into. College football, the quarterback carousel that is going on right now. I think it's all safe to say that right now we're 3 weeks away from the NFL playoffs. Imagine right when the regular season ends and we're talking about hopefully the Bengals make the playoffs, preparing for that. But, hey, you know what? T. Higgins is actually going to sign with the Buffalo Bills right now, even though they're preparing for a playoff game, possibly against the Bills in the first round. That's how stupid college sports is right now, that free agency is happening and off-season activity is happening while the most important part of the season is technically going on. Big names from a lot of the teams that are in the playoffs have entered the portal. And some coaches are saying, hey, I know you're leaving, but we're going to allow you to still play big pivotal roles in our team's success or failures come playoff time. So we got that coming up shortly as well. But it really is silly.
It's
free agency in the middle of a season.
Yeah. Some players entering the portal and playoff teams choosing to stay with their teams in practice. Other players, their money offers in the portal contingent on them entering now and leaving their teams. Others just making the decision to do so. And I don't blame any of the kids that are stepping away from their teams or staying with them. I think the system is incredibly flawed to have a transfer window in the middle of your season.
Yeah, the NCAA is a joke, and the people that run college football are learning that this NIL thing, though good for the athletes and probably better for the sport, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be altered at least a little bit. Regulated, I guess, would be the better word. It needs to be regulated. So I imagine that's going to happen pretty soon, but you're seeing it right now. I mean, you have to have some sort of control over the free agency period where kids aren't forced to leave their schools halfway through the year.
Yeah.
Just can't happen.
And a lot of these kids, highly recruited freshmen that don't necessarily get early playing time at big-time schools, and then they're called as soon as the season ends, and they're offered $1.5 million to be a guaranteed starter somewhere else. And what do you want them to do? Turn it down? And
Yeah.
It's just such a flawed system that I think there needs to be more blame placed on the higher-ups than the kids.
Yeah, we'll get to all of that and more coming up in just a bit. Again, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, let's get out of the way. Kenner, where's the sounder? Come on, Elliot.
No sounder. I've given up on the sounder. That's okay.
Sounder's dead.
The sounder's dead, and it'll never come back. But that's okay.
It'll be the show's version of Easter when it does come back.
But
though,
that's okay. That's right. We'll move on. I'll move on from the sounders. So here we go. Elliot's headlines. I love two things. Yada 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 yada.
The energy just,
Listen, the headlines usually have the sounder, but the sounder doesn't.
I'm not blaming you. I'm not.
It's
not
just
at
like
all.
you got to have the
killed
sounder.
headlines.
That's okay. It has really killed the headlines. NFL, if you missed it last night, Falcons. By the way, 2 worst football games of the season. Congrats, NFL, you did it again. Falcons hold on to beat the Raiders 15-9. Cousins 11 for 17, 112 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He looked terrible. Bijan Robinson 22 carries, 125 yards. Drake London 3 catches, 53 yards, and their only touchdown of the game.
They asked Raheem Morris after the game about potentially going to Penix,
Yeah.
and the answer certainly left the door open. So I have to wonder if we could see him at some point this year.
He looked frustrated on the sideline too, Penix.
I would be too if the quarterback I'm sitting behind is immobile and having a 0 touchdown, 8 interception streak in a 4-game losing skid.
Got one last night. Desmond Ridder, 23 for 29. I believe entering the fourth quarter, he was like 7 for 19 or something preposterous for like 10 yards. But 23 for 39 was his final stat line, a touchdown and an interception. He looked good towards the end. The last 2 drives, he looked fine. The Bears, they get crushed by the Vikings 30-12. Caleb Williams, 18 for 31, 191 yards and an interception. Keenan Allen led the Bears receivers, 82 yards and a touchdown. Sam Darnold, 24 for 40, a touchdown, a pick. Aaron Jones, 18 carries, 86 yards, and a score. Justin Jefferson led the Vikings receivers with 73 yards and a touchdown.
Caleb Williams
2
did not
terrible
throw an
games.
interception because it was his 8th straight game without an interception. The Bears have lost all
Did I say
8.
that?
Yep, and the Bears have lost all 8 of those games that he hasn't thrown an interception
And the
in.
touchdown, I meant.
No other QB in NFL history has had a streak of 5 consecutive games without a pick and lost all 5. He's now at 8 in a row.
How about that? Misses a lot of open wide receivers, does
He does. That
Caleb
was a
Williams.
couple bad throws to Keenan for sure yesterday, especially on that last drive.
Brutal. NBA news, not a ton because the NBA stinks. Joel Embiid to miss at least another week, but the Sixers beat the Hornets 121-108. The Pistons, they win another game in overtime. They led by 18 in the fourth and blew it, 125-124 over the Heat. The Cavaliers are now 23-4, Kenner's Cavaliers, after a win over the Nets. Massive win there. And finally, other sporting news, we have Conor McGregor agreeing to fight Logan Paul in India.
Well, Connor agreed to it.
Okay.
I don't know that anyone else has.
Okay.
I think
So-
that's just kind of...
So that's just not going to happen?
I would be shocked. But, they don't usually test for steroids on those Paul Boys fights. So
Yeah.
Connor would probably be okay.
I would take McGregor in that one.
Yeah.
I'd take McGregor in that one. And finally, some sad news. Zach Fremantle has been listed, or at least it's been said that he has a lower body injury. It's believed to be a knee, potentially an ACL. He will be missing significant time for the Xavier Musketeers. So it happened on a play towards the end of the game with about 4 minutes left. Came down hard. And unfortunately, Xavier is going to lose their best player.
Yeah, I saw that come out yesterday too, and you might have just said it. What's the projection for how long he might be out?
There's no timetable.
I just saw indefinitely.
They have to wait until the swelling in the knee goes away.
Ooh.
So he will not be playing for a long time.
Saw the I know we'll get into the Dayton-Cincinnati matchup more kind of later on in the show, but top 25 came out. UC bumped up a little bit.
They
Dayton
did.
now in the top 25 as well, so that sets up what will be a top 25 showdown coming up on Friday night, which is cool. And Dayton has UNLV tonight. Some UD fans got mad at me on my show yesterday because I said the most dangerous game this week is UNLV, not Cincinnati. And the reason is because you come off that emotional high against Marquette, number 6 team in the country. You're looking ahead to going on the road to take on Cincinnati, the number 19 team in the country. And now you got 5-4 UNLV coming to your arena. Can you match that intensity for them that you had for obviously Marquette and that you're going to have for Cincinnati coming up? So a little trap game tonight. Does UC have a game between obviously the crosstown and Dayton on Friday?
I don't believe so. I believe that is the next game. Yep.
I think it's a nice little breather then to prepare for that.
8:30 Friday night.
Woo. ESPNU, by the way.
The U.
There you go.
So yesterday I laughed because so we started getting calls in the middle of the show yesterday when it was airing in Dayton, and someone had called in mad at your ESPN2 take.
Okay.
But I started thinking, I'm like, okay, let's rank the ESPN, or let's rank the linear stations. Like, okay, ESPN's the number one that you want to be on. Is ESPNU or ESPN2 better? I'd say ESPN2.
I think they're both the same. ESPN2 and ESPNU are the same thing because you have access to both those channels. They're the same. They're, to me, if you're on cable, it's all the same. ESPN1, ESPN2, ESPNU, doesn't matter to me.
I think ESPN2 and ESPNU are like the same as ESPN Plus. I always think that. I don't know why. I watch ESPN2 and ESPNU exponentially less than I watch ESPN Plus.
But it's literally like the station that's behind ESPN. It's the same thing.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But like
it's both on cable.
I don't have any reason to ever watch those channels, is what I'm saying. Like, I never view those games or see those schedules. Like, if I'm watching something on those channels, I'm usually on ESPN Plus anyways.
That's fine. I think I might watch ESPN2 more. I feel like there's more good college basketball games on ESPN2.
So you're not. I mean, I know this answer. You are really down on ESPN Plus. From a college basketball standpoint, and really sports in general, I love ESPN Plus. I love that you can watch any team, any night, anywhere, any conference that's aligned with that. And I don't even have a list of conferences who aren't. I just like the access, the fact that you can watch any college basketball game in the country. You can watch pretty much every conference, any team in any conference play any given night. But to me, like yesterday, you were talking about the quality. I think the quality is based on the school that's carrying it, because it's not like ESPN is sending their production trucks or anything. A lot of it is just based on the TV production quality that they have on campus from that regards. But no, some people, again, when a game is regulated to ESPN Plus, they look at it as like an insult. But again, that's just I don't know. Like I said, I like that you could have access to any game anywhere.
I have no issue with ESPN Plus for the rest of the 300 teams in college basketball that aren't the Power 5 or Power 4, whatever the hell you want to call it, if you want to include the Big East in there. But it's just, I would prefer my team to be on cable. That's why. I'd love to watch Loyola Marymount take on Ryder at midnight on a Tuesday on ESPN Plus. But when it comes to real basketball, I'd like that to be on regular television. But that's the way it's streamed. The world is streaming now, so you have to get used to it. I buy ESPN Plus for the college basketball season, and then I unsubscribe immediately.
Fair enough. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here on a Tuesday. Let's talk a little baseball. Fangraphs put out what their projected top 100 MLB players list will look like. 3 Reds make the list, obviously, but it's not the players that are on the list. I guess it's the order of these. There's one player that is high up on this list ahead of Elly De La Cruz. We'll talk about that when we come back. And we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I think when I see lists come out that rank players in Major League Baseball, is that like I feel like football and basketball, anytime when the NFL puts out their top 100, obviously I prefer that one because that one comes out in the middle of no content season.
Yeah.
So that's easy to dive into and really formulate hot takes based on that. But when lists come out ranking players in Major League Baseball, it's so difficult because of how many different positions there are. How often players are used throughout games, and obviously pitchers. You put pitchers on a list that play every 5 days, on a list that has players that play every single day. You obviously will have relievers on that list as well. But I always find it. Which sport do you think is the most difficult to rank the best players in that particular sport? Basketball is the easiest because I think I think every player is pretty close, especially in positionless basketball in today's era of college and the NFL at this point, or college and the NBA at this point. But yeah, like NFL, Major League Baseball, which sport is it more difficult to rank players with all the different positions and usages out there?
NFL seems pretty difficult because you can have a really good defensive player, and a lot of people like myself wouldn't know their name because they play defense, opposed to any wide receiver. I know more wide receiver 4s in the NFL than starting cornerbacks. So I think there's that. But I think there's still enough metrics to have a better system to rank players. MLB's hard. MLB's hard because each player has a different type of role.
And the bar for like offensive success, even though they all hit at every position, is so different. You
can have the best closer in the league, but relatively speaking, he pitches 1 inning every couple of days. So, and you can have the great starting pitcher, but that starting pitcher might only go 5 innings opposed to a pitcher who averages 6 1/3. You know what I mean? So I would say it's a little bit more difficult to rank in baseball accurately because it's just so different.
So Brooks Gate put out, he shared the tweet that I came across the graphic. Fangraphs put out, projecting the top 100 players for 2025.
Yeah, I saw this one.
And for those watching on ESPN Plus, for those watching on ESPN Plus,
ESPN
my
Plus.
Apologies. For those watching on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, here's the list right here for Fangraphs. I know it's fine print, but if you look closely, it's an interesting list that ranks the top 100 players in Major League Baseball. Let's just talk about the Reds that fall on this list right now. You have to go all the way to number 37 to come across your first Cincinnati Red, and that's, you would think would be Elly De La Cruz, and this is not a shot at the player that's there.
Yeah.
But I was a little surprised to see a guy that was very, very good his rookie year, but still missed a lot of games due to injury, missed his entire second season with the Reds, and that's Matt McClain. Matt McClain coming in at 37 with Elly De La Cruz coming in at 42. Not a big gap in those numbers, but am I wrong for being a little surprised that Matt McClain is ranked higher on that list than Elly De La Cruz?
Yeah, no, I was certainly stunned when I saw it at first, but I think the first thing that I take away from this is a little bit of a sense of relief that maybe all of us Reds fans putting so much hope in Matt McClain being a good second baseman isn't just us being crazy and being homers. A lot of people think he's a really, really good player. I mean, look who he's ranked ahead of there, 37, 38, 39, and 40 are Corbin Burns, Manny Machado, and Freddie Freeman. That's a pretty good spot to be in going into your second full season, really first full season, because he came up early or late his rookie year. So, yeah, I thought it was more exciting that many people have faith in Matt McClain than anything. But, yeah, I think Elly De La Cruz is ridiculously low, regardless of where he ranks in relation to Matt McClain. I don't think he's outside the top, 25 players in the MLB going into next year, and that even seems like I'm being a little generous to avoid a little pushback there. I'd put him inside the top 15 or so for sure, based on just what we saw last year and the hope of progression, obviously. But that's what you're basing these rankings on, is a hope of progression. So I have no problem baking some of that in there. I think Ellie's probably about 30 spots too low, but McClain, love where he's at. And if they think McClain and Ellie are similar level of players going into this year, then the Reds have a damn good middle infield to rely on.
Ellie should be ahead of Matt McClain, and I don't understand that. Matt McClain, that's a fine ranking. He has to play baseball. He has to be healthy. So Hunter Green at 96. Hunter Green's not better than 96th.
That one was crazy.
That's.
I've seen a couple.
He's an all-star.
2025 pitching rankings that didn't have him in the top 10 or 15.
Yeah,
which is insane to me.
I just don't. You can't watch, and this is where it kind of sucks being a small market team because nobody watches the Reds. But if you watched baseball last year, Hunter Green is most certainly a top 10 pitcher. Maybe if you want to say top 15 pitcher in Major League Baseball, I'd die on that hill. That's outrageous. Elly De La Cruz at 42. If you listed all the names in front of him, I would say a majority probably are better. But 42, what are we doing? Again, all-star, but I think he's better than 10 more of those guys. Jacob deGrom's ranked 12th. The guy doesn't play baseball. Jacob deGrom hasn't had more than 15 starts since 2019. So I don't know what this list is trying to prove. Julio Rodriguez is fine. Bad year last year. He's a top 10 player this year, according to this. Kind of crazy to me, but I try not to get mad at lists. But if I were to get mad at lists, I say having Hunter Green at 96th and Ellie De La Cruz at 40. What was it?
47 or 43?
42.
42. My bad.
Almost, Kenner.
Yep.
If you had to look at those two names right there and say they're not better than X amount of people, 42. That's what Ellie De La Cruz gets? Nah.
Well, in good
not gonna
news
work.
for Cincinnati fans, the last time a Cincinnati professional superstar was inexplicably ranked in the 40s on their rankings, he put up a Triple Crown season. Jamar Chase ranked 45
That's
in
fair.
the NFL Top 100 this year. So maybe Ellie De La Cruz goes for the Triple Crown.
And again, Ellie De La Cruz plays 160 games a year.
Right. That's another thing about this.
160 games.
Look at the people
a
above
year.
him. A lot of them don't play.
A lot of
50.
them don't play. Yeah, I mean, Jacob deGrom doesn't play baseball. Jacob deGrom shouldn't be on any list ever, except for the injured list. My throat's killing me. But yeah, what an outrageous list.
Now, I think we all kind of unanimously disagree with where all three Reds are ranked, but there's no snubs, right? Like, there's no fourth Red that we think should be in the top 100. It's pretty clearly those three and then no one else.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Just glad we're on the same page there.
I mean, if you add all the players that the Reds are going after, I mean, there's quite a few Reds. To be fair, there's quite a lot of Reds on this list that they just haven't,
Now, if you added up all of the skill of all the Reds players that operated in the outfield platoon this year, would that player be in the top 100? A Will Benson, Stuart Fairchild. I mean, who else can we throw in there? Jake Fraley, Hernandez, Mix. Levi Jordan maybe got anything in the outfield?
If you combine them all,
Would they be a top 100 player?
no.
I don't think so either.
No.
Good point made by the chat here. Will Benson's been posted a lot by the Reds this offseason doing charitable work. Round of applause for him for the work in the community, but seems like he's not going to get cut if they're using him for this much PR.
yeah. Let me guys ask you about Ellie too. With Ellie, I mean, again, we look at him. He comes on that list at number 42. Look at the players ahead of him. Why do you think there are that many players ranked ahead of him? Because I'm the biggest Reds homer in the world after what happened with the Soto conversation a while back. I obviously didn't frame that correctly, but it's okay. I got beat up for that. But when you look at everything that Ellie brings to the table, as we've discussed, what he does on the base paths, what he does with the bat in his hand, what he does defensively, it's hard for me to look at everything that guy does and look at the fact that there's 41 guys ranked ahead of him. Why do you think he is there on that list? Because you brought up the NFL Top 100. That list is formulated based on the players in the league kind of putting that together. This is obviously through FanGraphs. Again, I'm not saying it's more credible than that, but FanGraphs is using a lot of metrics and a lot of data to kind of put this together. What do you think is the thing that's kind of holding Ellie back and having him on the list where he is compared to everyone else ahead of him?
I mean, you'd have to think it's the same thing that holds him back on most lists, and it's the strikeouts and errors. If you don't think those are going to fall at a considerable number, I understand not putting him in the top 20 or so players in the league, because those are worries to have. But if you expect progression in either of those areas, then I don't know how you can justify this ranking whatsoever. I mean, if he's even marginally better at either of those things, then he's going to be one of the best, if not the best, shortstops in baseball.
Yeah, Ellie De La Cruz is a superstar. He's going to be an all-star this year. I think this year he's going to have a legit run at MVP. Shohei had his fun. He's going to be a really good player. But I think Ellie's going to have a chance to perhaps win an MVP this year. If he's able to continue the stolen bases numbers, keep improving offensively, lowering the strikeout number, we're going to be great. Defensively, I still think he's fine. Improve some of the silly errors. But, yeah, Ellie's unbelievable, and we're never going to be able to pay him.
There we go. Gunnar Henderson at 2. Was that a shock to you? Is he the number 2 player in Major League Baseball, in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy to say. I don't know that I would necessarily have had him at 2, but certainly top 5 or so. I think he's the best shortstop in baseball for sure.
I wouldn't put him there like Jacob just said, but if
I would have had Soto at 2 behind
correct.
Shohei.
I wouldn't. I'm not going to sit here and complain about it, but I would not have.
I think that top 5, Shohei 1, Gunnar 2, Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, Juan Soto, those players in the top 5. We can argue order. I think that's the right top 5.
That's fair.
So Bobby Witt and Ellie get put in this conversation a lot of times. Obviously, they're youth. They're from when they get called into the league, but they always get put side by side in a lot of comparisons and talking points. So to see Bobby Witt where he is and Ellie where he is, why the gap between Bobby Witt and Ellie, in your opinion?
I think the Bobby Witt-Ellie comparison is that they're both young and fast, and shortstops with exciting power and really good prospects. Bobby Witt's just a little further along than I think Ellie is, and when Ellie has a couple more years under his belt, maybe we are talking about who's the best shortstop. We probably are, in my opinion, between those three. I think those three are the future of the shortstop position. Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt, Ellie De La Cruz. I think we're going to have debates for the next however many years about who's the best shortstop between those three. So though Ellie might not be there yet, he's a year or two behind both of those guys, depending on who you're talking about. So I would imagine that he vaults himself into that conversation probably by this time next year in more of a ranking sense.
Yeah.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wingham and Dayton. Jose Ramirez coming in at number 7 on that list as well. And the guard, I mean, him taking such a major pay cut to stay in Cleveland.
Yeah,
Cleveland.
His contract's a joke.
That's pretty wild. That's the biggest deal, and biggest deal in all of sports. Is there another superstar in sports right now that is as cost efficient as that one right there?
I mean, depending on what you think of Bobby Witt, he's right up there too. 11 years for $225 million for what he is at his age. He would have got easily $400 on the open market.
I'm trying to think, and I can't think of one.
Because NBA players, they don't give discounts. No way. And with the players that have given discounts in the past, like LeBron, D-Wade, and Bosh,
Right.
I mean, that was over a decade ago.
And the NBA players have with the thresholds for the Supermax and everything, they get more money when they return.
Yep.
So there's usually not that bidding war.
NFL, no one's given anyone any kind of break every time. And this isn't like
Since
Bengals,
Brady.
It's not like, and even those, when you go back and look at those, it was always shaped as, man, Tom Brady gave these major pay cuts that allowed the Patriots to go and do what? It's one thing if Tom Brady gave those major pay cuts and then they went out and got the best players in football to put around him. He gave him a break, and they never really put superstars around him. That was about how they drafted and developed during that time, during the Tom Brady era. But if you go look, he wasn't shaving off major dollars, right? Like, it's not like he was taking $5, $6, $7 million less per year. He was just taking a couple here and there. It's why I always laugh. I think that's one of the more overrated narratives. Maybe I'm wrong on that in your opinion, but I think that's one of the more overrated narratives out there, that Tom Brady, that the Patriot way was Tom Brady taking less money. He never took significantly less money. It's not as if he was the 15th or 16th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He was still top 5 in paid quarterbacks throughout his run. It's not as if he was always taking this major cut that I think a lot of people frame it as.
Yeah, I don't know the numbers. I just know that that's always been the story behind why the Patriots were able to succeed for so long.
I wish more players would take cuts, but it's just not. I mean, you get what 100 years max on this earth. You want to make as much money as you can so you can retire early and give your family and all the money in the world. So I get why people don't do it, but I would love for a player like Ellie De La Cruz to sign a hometown deal and stay in Cincinnati. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not.
Probably not. All right, let's continue talking Cincinnati Reds. Ellie De La Cruz is a star that the Reds have, but they're trying to add more stars to this list. And
they're interested.
And maybe I gave the Reds a little bit too much credit early on when we started hearing the Reds being involved in a lot of talks with some of these bigger names, whether it be through trade, free agency, what have you. But at some point, the Reds have to land one, right? At some point, the Reds have to add a big name to this roster to show the fans that they are serious, or is this just some kind of show? Is this just some kind of little dog and pony show that they're just trying to show fans that they're trying to be aggressive? But how long will that last before fans say, okay, this is nice that you're interested in these guys, but how long before you start adding some of these guys? Teoscar Hernandez, another name that is added to the list that the Reds are pursuing at this point. How excited should we be about that? We'll get to all that and more coming up next. All right, and we are back. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, Elliot Rearing and Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Let's talk a little Cincinnati Reds. We've already talked Cincinnati Reds a little bit to open up the show today, but the Reds' offseason of being aggressive or almost aggressive continues. Obviously, they moved on from Jonathan India. They get Brady Singer that they add to the rotation. They get the qualifying offer complete, of course, with Nick Martinez. And I guess I don't want to, they add the best manager that was available, obviously, this cycle, and they go and get Terry Francona. That's not a bad offseason. That's one of the bigger offseasons the Reds have had. But again, when you say it like that, that's still, that bar's pretty low of what to compare it to for what we would consider a big offseason. We have talked about the fact that with Terry Francona coming to Cincinnati, that we have hoped that what that means is with Terry Francona means a little bit more aggressiveness from the front office. You don't bring in a manager like Terry Francona to continue operating the way that they have over the last decade and change throughout, especially the Castellini ownership era. You would think that you go get a manager like Terry Francona and you want to capitalize on a guy like that leading this organization, as the manager. So it's nice to see right off the bat that they, get the Brady Singer deal done. They get the Nick Martinez qualifying offer done. They're in on, obviously, the pitcher from the White Sox, the lefty, that they were hoping to land him. The Red Sox ultimately get that done. The Reds are in on a lot of names that are out there, but the most recent one, of course, and this was put out on Chatterbox Sports socials yesterday, the Reds are one of 6 teams who are currently in on Teoscar Hernandez. Now, we've talked about this name in the past. I don't think we've given it too much attention because I didn't even think that the Reds would be in on him at all. It was just a name that we were hoping for. But again, I want to be excited about this. I do. I want to say, hey, my goodness, look at this. The Reds are going after some of these bigger names in free agency that we weren't sure if they were actually going to kick the tires on or not. Would they financially be able to afford it? They're one of 6 teams that are going after Teoscar Hernandez. But the problem is when you look at the teams that they're, in on, Teoscar Hernandez has the option of going to the Reds, or he can go to the Red Sox, which they can spend a little bit more money. How about the Phillies? The Yankees, I think, are a high spender, right? They spend a little bit of money. The Reds could outbid them, correct? The Blue Jays, who are very similar to the Reds, the Blue Jays, how many big names have they been in on over the years? Shohei Ohtani, the Blue Jays were seriously, aggressively going after Shohei Ohtani. So the Blue Jays, say what you want about them, but they're willing to fork over money if the opportunity presents itself. And then, of course, the Dodgers. The poverty franchise that is the Dodgers. It's great that the Reds are in on this Teoscar Hernandez conversation or activity, if you will. But at the end of the day, when you start to see the teams that are also interested in Teoscar Hernandez, the idea that the Reds are going to offer the amount of money that it's going to take to get him, when you look at the teams that are also going after him, they're not going to outbid the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox. They're just not going to be able to outbid those teams. So although I appreciate the fact that the Reds are being semi-aggressive and they're looking at players and talking to players, talking to agents, trying to add bigger names and talents to this roster, I appreciate it. But actions at some point are going to have to speak louder than words. And dollar signs are going to have to start speaking louder than words and actions at some point. And until I see the Reds be aggressive financially, all this activity kind of means nothing at the end of the day. I don't want to be negative because I've been as positive as I can be ever since the addition of Terry Francona as manager. But this is probably, I'm getting to the point now where it's like I'm no longer even excited to see that the Reds are in on some names until I see them pull the trigger on adding a big name, until I see a big name say, yes, Cincinnati's where I want to go. This Terry Francona thing, this experiment, everything that's going on in Cincinnati, maybe I'm being dramatic, but I'm going to start to become less and less excited about it if the actions don't start matching the words of how serious they want to be about winning games throughout this Terry Francona era.
Yeah, I think Reds fans at some point this offseason are going to have to come to a relative realization that being in the mix is the best we can hope for, and then we got to hope that some things bounce our way because we're not going to be able to match the offers, especially with the teams that are also listed as in the mix there. I mean, you mentioned the list of names there, the normal usual suspects, the normal big spenders. Every one of those guys, as I mentioned at the top of the show, had a major offer in for Juan Soto at the beginning of this offseason and obviously missed out on him. So now they have a lot of money to spend. And Teoscar Hernandez is probably, the consensus second outfielder after Soto on this market. So it would certainly be a shock to me if he ends up in Cincinnati over any of the other options with much bigger offers, I would assume. But I do think it matters as long as they get somebody. It matters that they're in the mix for these big names because, I mean, it's not going to be a good prize if that's all it is. But if you're shooting for these guys and fall down to, a mid-level guy, it's better than shooting to the mid-level guys and falling down to the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I'm happy that they're in the mix, but at some point the Reds have to go out and show that they're willing to commit and be a contender, be a spender. I don't know what this contract exactly would look like. I imagine somewhere around the ballpark, 3 to 4 years. Do you think he'd get, 25 a year? It'd be right around there, 25 to 27 a year. I don't think he's a $30 million player, but who knows what the Dodgers are willing to spend. I don't think the Reds have that in them. I don't think the Reds have $100 million in them for 4 years for Teoscar Hernandez. They could be, but I'd like them to take that next step. It's great that they're interested. It's great that we know they're interested because, to be fair to them, we could not see their name at all in any of these rumors. So just to see that they're at least trying gives me some sort of hope. But until I see it pass, like Kinner said, until I see it cross the goal line, it's almost like it's a moot point to say that they're going to sign anybody.
I'll give them more credit for being in on these players when they sign their first bat. Like if they're in on Crochet and in on Hernandez and in on all these guys, and then they end up with, a Santander, I'll be like, wow, great work being in on all those guys. You ended up with a really good outfielder. Now, if you're in on all those guys and you end up with someone that doesn't excite me, then it's a little bit of a different conversation. I think how much credit you give them for being in on these big names is really dependent on who they end up signing.
Yeah, what I don't want as a fan is to be worked. We see this in college athletics a lot. When it comes to recruiting, there are some players that certain coaches and programs don't want, but they know what it looks like from a perception standpoint if you're not in on some of the biggest talent that you have in state. I remember the biggest complaint about Urban Meyer was that he wasn't heavily recruiting in-state talent.
Yeah.
And just based on different people I've talked to, Urban Meyer was notorious for just handing out offers to guys that they didn't heavily recruit. Like they didn't really go to house visits. They didn't really go check them out at games. But some of these players would get an offer from Ohio State so that the message boards would jump on it. Oh, man, Ohio State offered such and such 4-star wide receiver from blah, blah, blah. And then people could say, well, look, Ohio State, they are pursuing talent within the state. It's just a PR thing. It's just a check off the box to make Buckeye fans feel like he was aggressively going after talent in state as well. And they had to start doing that because of the complaint that Urban was like, and I was pro-Urban on this, I don't really care where the talent comes from. I don't care if it comes from Alaska. If that's the best talent that's in the country, you go get it. I don't really care where it comes from. But that PR stuff matters. But at the same time, I don't like being worked. I don't want to be worked as a Reds fan. I don't want the Reds just checking in on guys just so that they could put it out there that, hey, we're going after this.
Yeah.
We're trying to be aggressive. But maybe I should slow down on being a little critical because you're right. If they do land one of these bigger names, then you know what? Hey, they were aggressive. They went after a few things that fell through, but they finally got their guy. All right, cool. I'll give them credit for being aggressive. I think they've been semi-aggressive based on Red standards to this point. But, yeah, and at the end of and I guess the question I have is, what's worse, seeing their name in on a lot of these big names in free agency and trades and not landing them, or is it worse sitting here doing this show and us not even talking Reds for months because there's just no Reds updates or headlines out there? Which one is worse, I guess?
Yeah, it's far worse for us to sit here and be like, where are the Reds? Why aren't they interested in anybody? We want them to be interested. We want them to put their name in the hat for Teoscar Hernandez, for a guy like Anthony Santander. Do I believe that they're capable of getting them? No. And I don't fully fault the Reds at all times. I complain about ownership. I complain about spending. But the way this sport has gone, you can't compete with these contracts. You can't compete with the Boston Red Sox. You can't compete with the New York Yankees, the Dodgers. These teams aren't – you're not even in the same sport as the Reds. They play a different game. And it's a tough realization, as Jacob liked to say earlier on. It's a tough realization for Reds fans to have, but you have to realize it. You can't get all of these guys, and to be quite honest, you probably can't get any of them based on what the contract markets are right now in Major League Baseball. If I'm the Cincinnati Reds, I keep putting my name in the hat. I have these conversations because that's what a good organization does, knowing you'll probably lose, but you still try and you try. And then you maybe make a trade. I would start making trades if I were the Cincinnati Reds GM, Brad Meter, at least. And again, people don't like trading prospects. You got to trade some of these pitching prospects eventually. You can't hoard them all. I would look to start trading, the Connor Phillips, the Chase Pettys. I would, because I don't know what their role would be with the Cincinnati Reds going forward. We have Rhett Lauder coming up. We have Chase Burns. I don't know if Chase Burns is going to be an elite closer or a starting pitcher. I don't know what that role is. We have Andrew Abbott. Graham Ashcraft is a guy we haven't talked about ever. I don't know what Graham Ashcraft's going to do. He just gave his jersey up to Brady Singer. So is Graham Ashcraft going to be a part of the team next season? I don't know. And you have to start trading some of them. I'd look to trade Ashcraft, Chase Petty, Andrew Abbott. Somebody's got to go, and then we can bring more elite talent that way. I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, this one I'm not getting too excited about because I think there's a 0.0.0.01% chance that they get this done just based on the teams that they, when you look at the Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, the fact and Blue Jays, the fact that whole division is going after him, one of those teams most likely will end up with him. I have zero faith that the Reds have a shot to get him based on the teams that are going after him. I actually did feel pretty good about the Crochet chances just because it was between them and the Cubs, and the Cubs are a notorious, higher spender than the Reds, no doubt about it. But I did feel like the fact that it was between the Reds and the Cubs that meant, and that's a trade scenario, that was the Reds, whatever they were offering, that the White Sox had put the Reds in a category that they liked what the Reds were willing to give up, and they put that on the same standard of what the Cubs were willing to give up. Obviously, the Red Sox come in and swoop in and get that deal done. But I felt better about the talks of Crochet just because for them to be a finalist to land him, that team had to be pleased with whatever the Reds were willing to give up, and that shows that the Reds were willing to give up something of substance to go get a talent like that. Free agency like this, it's just pretty simple. You see the teams that are in on it. The Reds can out-duel teams in the trade market based on their farm system and based on the prospects they have. They can't out-duel teams in the free agency market, especially when you look at, well, coincidentally enough, the highest spenders in baseball all going after a name that the Reds are interested in. It's just not going to happen, right? The scale is 0 to 10, 1 to 10, however you want to do it. The chances of the Reds landing Teoscar Hernandez are what? Is this even a story? So you think there's a chance?
He's way higher.
I'll give him a 3. Why not?
I would say it's a 0.0.
No, give him a 1.
They were dead last on the list of 6 teams.
It was alphabetical.
The most expensive teams in Major League Baseball, the Reds were dead last behind all of them.
All those guys had an offer in for Soto that was higher than our owner's net worth.
What a world. Yeah, I'm going to give them a 0.0% chance, but they're interested. They're interested, and that's all that matters to me. You could be the other way. It could be worse. And to be fair, I don't know if they need one outfielder. The Cincinnati Reds need one outfielder. They need one outfield power bat, somebody that can hit home runs in right field, that can play every day. That's what they need. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it, but they're one of those away from me saying this roster is able to win the division. There's one of those guys away. I still think you might need some help in the infield. Jeimer Candelario yesterday injured his toe, I believe. Running down or trying to outrun a ground ball. So if we're able to find a cheap but solid infielder and or make a trade and then somehow find some outfielder that can play every day and give the Reds 25 home runs, that's what I'm looking for to make this team at least more complete. Because you have Spencer Steer in left, you have TJ Friedel in center, Ellie and Matt middle infield, first and third's up for grabs, but you'd like to think it's going to be CES or Jeimer at first. And that third base spot's pretty wide open. It's going to be a platoon of some sort of Santiago Espinal, Noelvi Marte. You have the catcher spot filled in Tyler Stevenson. The pitching staff's pretty much filled. Maybe a reliever or two down the stretch. Again, we have guys like Graham Ashcraft that are going to have to play baseball eventually, so maybe put them in the bullpen and you have all this figured out. But the one spot we do not have right now for sure is that right field spot. I love Jake Fraley. He's not good enough to play there by himself every single day. He's not. Will Benson, if I'm going to be completely honest, probably shouldn't be on the Major League roster next year. So we'll see what we do. I think Nick Krall knows the situation. I think he's a pretty smart guy. I think they're going to try their best to get a Teoscar Hernandez type.
Do you guys think the fact that the Cubs, who got Kyle Tucker, and shout out to Reed, I know he just jumped on Chatterbox Reds with Kirby to talk about that, the Cubs being viewed as the favorite now to come out of the NL Central, and rightfully so. I mean, that was a splash move right there. Do you think it's a coincidence, however, that the Cubs, who get Kyle Tucker, not even 24 hours later, the Reds are in on Teoscar Hernandez? I'm not saying Hernandez trumps a Kyle Tucker deal, but do you think it's a coincidence at all? I don't think it is. I think that if the Reds saw that move by the Cubs, because I think before that move with the Cubs, I don't think the Reds felt, okay, we're 100% better than the Cubs, but I do believe that we can we can't compete with the Cubs. We could compete with anyone in this division. That move with Tucker might have put the Cubs over the top of everybody else at this point. Do you think that move was enough of a motivator to maybe get the Reds in on the conversation with Teoscar Hernandez? Do you think that played a role in this?
Yes, because I think the division's up for grabs. There was a projection that Reed keeps throwing out that the division winner is going to have like 84 wins. The Cubs win the division with like 84 wins. The Reds can get 84 wins. I have no doubt in my mind. So they probably saw that move and said, all right, the Cubs got a little better. Let's get a little bit better. And they're going to try to get an outfielder of, obviously, Kyle Tucker's elite. Kyle Tucker's a top 20 player in Major League Baseball. But they can't get a player that good. They're not going to be able to pay a player like that. But if you can replicate something, just even close to the ballpark of the talent of Kyle Tucker, then yeah, you're in contention to win this division. I think the Brewers are okay. I can unfortunately never rule them out, because they always win games despite who's on their team.
Yeah.
But losing Devin Williams, losing Corbin Burns, losing who they've lost, I don't know if I believe in the Milwaukee Brewers going forward. I don't like where that organization's going. The Pittsburgh Pirates are a joke of an organization. I think truly they're a disgrace. And then outside of that, who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting the Cardinals, who are tanking. So I think the division is more than open for the Reds to take it. And again, you need that outfielder. And they saw the Cubs do it. And I think they're just trying to stay level with the Cubs as much as they can.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Here's my slight criticism of the Reds, and if that is the case. So some people will like that. Oh, man, the Cubs are aggressive, so the Reds are trying to counter. But at some point, for the longest time, the NL Central has just been so damn competitive, so damn tough. And I think it's vulnerable right now. I think it's weak, to be honest with you. I mean, you just talked about 84 wins. That's the projected win total to win this division. That's not a lot of wins. And that's not a very deep division if that's the case. If all you need is 84 wins, if that's the projected win total to take the Central, I don't think that that's a big number. I think that's a realistic number. At some point, I just wish the Reds, on any given year, when the Cardinals are fully loaded like we're accustomed to them being, when the Cubs are spending at the level that we're accustomed to them spending, and the Brewers have been a constant, I could understand if the Reds at times were like, I mean, we have a good roster, but being super aggressive doesn't really put us over the top of anybody else. I could understand the hesitancy with that. But when the division is so vulnerable, I just wish, rather than being reactive, oh man, the Cubs got Kyle Tucker, we need to go get Teoscar Hernandez. I wish the Reds just had the mentality of, all right, we got Ellie De La Cruz, we got Matt McClain, we got Hunter Green, we got Nick Lodolo, we went out and get Terry Francona. We're ready to rock. We're not going to wait for other teams to be aggressive and then match their intensity. We want to be the ones that they're chasing. I just wish the Reds would have capitalized, in not just this season, over the last couple, because I think the division's been very vulnerable the last couple of years. I just wish the Reds would have taken advantage of that opportunity, because it's not often, especially in our lifetime, where the Central has just been this down consistently. So I just wish that the Reds would have been more aggressive as far as being the aggressors versus being the reactors from that perspective. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Maybe that's asking too much. But I've always understood why the Reds haven't always been as aggressive as what we'd like them to be, because at the end of the day, what's the point? Even if you add a big name in the offseason, you're not going to close the gap between you and the Cardinals or you and the Cubs or you and the Brewers. But the Brewers don't anything, although I respect them for what they've done in recent years, you still got to pay attention to the Cubs and the Cardinals, even though they're not going to be aggressive this offseason. It's still the Cardinals. Don't be surprised for them to rattle out 80 to 85 wins next season just on accident. I just wish the Reds were more aggressive and would try to be the aggressors versus, oh, cool, man, damn, the Cubs went out and got Kyle Tucker. We need to get somebody now, too. I want them to be the aggressors at some point, and this is the time to do it.
It'd be nice, but baby steps. If you're going to be reactionary, go get someone, and then maybe next offseason we can be aggressors. We didn't sign anyone the last, 3, 4, 5 years worth a damn. So I guess Jamer maybe could be if he gets healthy. I don't know, but not a lot of optimism in the free agency, so I'm not going to be picky.
Last year, I don't blame them for what they did. They tried to ride the hot hand, and they tried to bet on the prospects that worked so well the year prior would do the same exact thing and be healthy and be available and be ready. And it wasn't the case. They saw that. They've seen that. And I think they're going to try to make moves. They traded Jonathan India. I think that's a great first step. Now you got to keep going. To your credit, should they be that first team? Should they be the aggressor? Yeah. But they won't be. It's not in their cards.
Fair enough. And by the way, do I really care how they go get these players? No, just go get it at the end of the day. But no, that's why when I saw what the Cubs did, good for them. Good for Reed. I know he's excited about that, but I'm like, damn, if the Reds really are being aggressive now because the Cubs did that, I guess I appreciate that. I guess it's better than just letting the Cubs do whatever they want, not reacting. But
the Reds of old would have seen the Cubs get Kyle Tucker and throw their hands up and say, well they're too good now. We can't chase them. So at least they view themselves as a relative competitor where they think making a move like this would put them in, I don't know, the driver's seat of the division, but certainly in a battle. I think that's good.
Last thing on this as we wrap it up, let's just say that 0.0001% chance that the Reds do get Teoscar Hernandez. What does he do to this team if they are fortunate enough to maybe pull the trigger to land him?
I think he's the dream. He's who you want at the high end of realistic this offseason, right? Even coming in, we knew Soto was off the list, and he's the best outfielder on the market not named Juan Soto. So ideally, that's who you're adding, and we knew this position was a major position of need, and if they're able to get Teoscar Hernandez, that would be an incredible offseason, especially if they were able to make another move or two.
He makes the team a division contender.
Yeah.
Because that's who you missed last year. You need home runs on this roster. You need more power. And you need a guy that's going to be able to play every day. I like the platoon lefties every once in a while, but we need a guy that plays every day. It's no knock on Jake Fraley. I want Jake Fraley to be a part of the team next year. I think Jake Fraley's good. Last year, I think he was battling a lot of different stuff, some family issues, some health issues. He's going to be better this season. But I think in a limited role, he's going to shine more than he would forcing to have him be that starting everyday right fielder. Teoscar Hernandez makes this team a division contender.
Getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting, closer and closer to spring training, closer and closer to opening day, closer and closer to baseball season where they will rip our hearts out. Hopefully not, though. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll be right back. All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Made a slight joke about the Reds potentially ripping our hearts out in 2025, but hey, you know, the only reason that they could rip our hearts out is the same reason they ripped our hearts out last year, is because we had expectations for them. The Reds can't disappoint you if they don't do enough to make you feel like there's something to look forward to. Like that season, let's be clear, the reason last season wasn't as exciting as the season before there was no expectations, and they played well above expectations. That was a house money season. No matter what happened, we were going to be pleased as long as they didn't lose 100 games, and they didn't even come close to losing 100 games. In fact, it was in a weird way, as a Reds fan, it was a magical year. You had an emergence of all this, superstar young talent. It looked like the Reds were ahead of schedule on the rebuild. You had that very fun month of June where you had that overlap of Joey Votto playing at a high level along with Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McClain. It was very cool kind of seeing that kind of cross over a little bit. That season was fun because there was no expectations. And it was just cool seeing everything kind of come together a little bit. You think back, then you look ahead to the next year. Man, we were talking about this Reds team winning the division. There was a lot of, prognosticators out there that were talking about the Reds being the, a sleeper contender in the NL Central. Well, they had everyone put to sleep before the All-Star break. They weren't even close. You even think about the Cincinnati Bengals, the second year of Joe Burrow. No one expected. You were hoping Joe Burrow came back from that injury and just looked like he can kind of get it back together, and hopefully they were trending in the right direction. That Super Bowl year was outstanding. It was amazing. It was a magical year because no one was expecting it. No one was expecting that in year 2 of Joe Burrow that they were going to go to a Super Bowl, or in year 3, just in a couple year, turnaround that they'd be in back-to-back AFC championship games or a Super Bowl. But then you look at the last 2 years for the Bengals, there's that evil word, expectations. You look at the last season for the Cincinnati Reds, there's expectations. There's going to be expectations. You go get Terry Francona, there's expectations next season for the Reds. As long as you have Joe Burrow at quarterback, there's going to be expectations for the Bengals moving forward. it's like when the teams are really, really down, when the Bengals were winning 2 and 4 games, you were just praying to get back to the point where you had enough players to get to the point where you had expectations. Same thing with the Reds. We're heading into 2 years ago where we're expecting them to lose 100 games. And all we could talk about at the time is, my gosh, the Reds didn't make any moves at all. They're not even trying to make moves. And here we are being all bougie, being upset that they're just talking to these players. They're not even actually getting these players. We would have killed for this activity 2 years ago. But everything changes, obviously. And with the expectations are great. They're fun. They get you invested into the season, into the team, emotionally invested, and you're setting yourself up to get hurt. And that's what the Reds and Bengals have done to their fan bases this season. When you think about that, and the parallels between the Reds and the Bengals, kind of similar. Two teams that, have to build themselves back up after, getting to the point where they're picking high in the draft consistently, had to build themselves back up, and then landing 2 superstar players. The parallels between Elly De La Cruz with the Reds and Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals, 2 star players that the organizations are building around. There's that excitement and the fun and the buzz and the energy and the expectations that come with those two. But last year, the Reds had us just miserable throughout the summer. The Bengals, there was so much expectations for them coming in, and from week 1 and the loss to the Patriots, and here we are, Bengals still in the playoff hunt, but there's still just that emptiness that you guys are trying to battle through right now, trying to force yourself to be excited. I guess I just got to ask, when you look at the Reds, you look at the Bengals, you look at 2 organizations that had expectations coming into these 2024 seasons, which team has hurt you more, I guess? Which team has you feeling more down about your respective being a fan of those prospective teams? Which one has you feeling more down at this point? Which one let you down the most in 2024?
The Reds and Bengals really ended up at the same spot if you're looking at the standings and everything. And the bar of expectations for the Bengals was so much higher. So I certainly go Bengals because you can hope for a lot of progression on young guys for the Reds and dream about the future and what that could bring. And with the Bengals, I think it's kind of a full reset of a window of one of the best times in Cincinnati sports history, at least the best time in my life, when the Bengals went to an AFC championship and a Super Bowl in back-to-back years. And this seems like the end of that stretch. So I would say this Bengals season is the most upsetting and disappointing season of my life in any sport. So certainly takes the cake over this Reds season.
Expectations is the word that's what I use to rank how much these teams kill me on the inside. I expect the Reds to fight is basically all I do. They're a pawn. They're a soldier. And if they can fight until the end of the season and maybe give me a chance at the playoffs, that's all I've asked. That's all I've ever asked. And continually they fail to reach that goal. The Bengals have a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League, and now for back-to-back seasons aren't going to make the postseason. They're both different kind of heartbreaks, and I think that the Reds, being my favorite team, I've watched them more, I've paid attention to them more over the past 25 years of my life. To have them never get better. Never. That's the part to me where it's just like I don't expect anything anymore. I can't expect the Bengals have gotten to the peak. They've gotten to the top of the mountain. Now they didn't win, but they got into the top. I'd like the Bengals to get back there. I'd like them to have Super Bowl expectations. The Bengals had the 5th, 6th best Super Bowl odds coming into this season, top 10, and they end where they end here, and it's just sad, man. Bengals, I would argue, is more heartbreaking because you have the key. You have the key in Joe Burrow to win football games. The Reds don't have the key per se. They have Elly De La Cruz, who's fantastic. You have Hunter Green. You have Nick Lodolo, fantastic. But we know in baseball you need more than 3 guys. You need more than 5 guys. You need a complete roster. It's what the Dodgers have. It's what the Rangers had when they won it. It's what the Yankees have. You just go down all the teams, and most of them have that, or at least half of them have that compete for a World Series. So I'm more heartbroken by the Bengals, I guess, just because I'm numb to it as a Reds fan. Eventually the Reds have to be good, and I think hiring Terry Francona, having Elly De La Cruz and Matt McClain, God willing they're healthy, having our pitching staff I think it's a top 10 pitching staff in baseball. I'll die on that hill. This is the time that the Reds need to capitalize. If they don't, if you can't win games in this 3 to 4 year window, there is no reason to believe they will ever win a game.
Yeah,
a meaningful game.
And it's like, and obviously with me not being a Bengals fan but a Reds fan, of course you're going to say, well, of course you're going to pick the Reds. But from a Reds perspective in this particular case, I do believe as long as Joe Burrow is in Cincinnati, and I know this season, you look at the season he has had, and it just hasn't been enough. And that's not an indictment on him. That just shows you, how many bad decisions were made as far as the construction of this roster, a roster that we thought was good enough to put them in position to be a Super Bowl contender. Even with the season you've gotten out of Joe Burrow, you still see the gap between them and the teams at the top. Now, we say that, but how many times have we said, man, if they could just sneak in, I like their chances against Buffalo. I like their chances against Kansas City. I mean, look, you look at the fact that, yeah, their record's not very good, but it's been a possession loss against every top team in the AFC and football across the board at this point. So it's like they're still close. You still feel like as long as you have Joe Burrow, there's going to be a shot. I think the thing that's demoralizing about being a Reds fan is even with Ellie playing at the level he is, that's more than not enough. Like, I know Joe Burrow's season hasn't been enough, and that's not all on him, but I think we saw last year, I felt like the Reds were so close heading into the year. And then you just see how hard it is to win in baseball. You see, we talk about, Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and the fact that you have Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McClain and Spencer Steer. We're rattling off a ton of names that we feel pretty good about. And even with all those names, you still see the gap between them and the top teams in baseball. A down year for the Reds is 100,000 miles gap between them and the top teams. I don't think there's even 10 miles between the Cincinnati Bengals and the top teams in football. I just think that, yes, it's disappointing because there were higher expectations for the Bengals than the Reds coming in. I just think last year was a realization, not that I didn't know it before, but it was just a re-realization that, damn, baseball's hard. It is so hard to put a contender out on that field. No matter, you have an Ellie De La Cruz, you think that's enough to turn a franchise around. It's not. They still miss the playoffs. Joe Burrow and the Bengals might still miss the playoffs, but again, like I said, the gap between them and the teams at the top, it's so tight just because of Joe Burrow. Ellie De La Cruz could be an MVP contender, have the best numbers in baseball over everyone this year. If the Reds, if they don't make enough moves, none of that is going to matter at the end of the day. Both are disappointing, no doubt about it. The Bengals were a Super Bowl contender coming in, and now they're fighting just to get the final playoff spot. That's disappointing. But again, it is so eerie sometimes seeing the similarities and the crossovers between both organizations.
Yeah.
Two teams that finally get superstars that they're building around. Two superstars that just got both fan bases to completely buy back in again. Two organizations that can't get out of their own way, that have their limitations, some that they've created themselves, some that just exist based on where they fall within a tax bracket compared to everyone else. But it is interesting to see the crossovers between both organizations. Maybe it's a market, or maybe it's an excuse. I'm not really sure.
And even these seasons are so similar. The fact that both teams had pretty garbage records pretty early and were kept, at least mentally, in the race by a terrible AFC or National League in both of their cases. The Bengals are talking about getting in now at 9-8. We still have a relative chance at a path. We're talking about how late were we talking about the Reds' path because of how bad the National League wildcard teams were. It's crazy how similar to these two seasons were. My thing with the Reds is I can hold on to a lot of injuries and a lot of young guys that hopefully take big steps next year. With the Bengals, I think it's a lot of new bodies, which is a tough place to be.
I was just going to add that you mentioned that, it seems like they're behind. The Reds are put at an unfair spot. I think it's when you look at the NFL, it's even if you didn't have Joe Burrow, which the Bengals do, it's easier to win that championship, that Super Bowl, given the fact that teams are more balanced. In Major League Baseball, the Reds don't have a shot because of spending.
Another similarity, too, I feel like, I know David Bell's no longer the manager, but David Bell and Zach Taylor, the talking points about them are very similar.
Very similar.
Because when the Bengals lose, it's all because of Zach Taylor. When they win, he gets no credit. And it was the same talking points with David Bell during his run as manager of the Reds. When they would have those winning streaks, when they would look really good for a couple series at a time, it wasn't, man, David Bell's doing a good job of getting these guys to buy back in and turn it around. It's, man, Ellie and the pitching and everyone's, coming together. But when they would lose, it wasn't, the pitching stinks or Ellie's needs to be better. It's David Bell's fault. it's also interesting to see the crossovers between those two because the talking points were the exact same. This answer might be easy because obviously David Bell's been fired, but which coach / manager was more least impressive, if you will? Which coach / manager let their team down more during this season for both teams?
I don't blame the coach or manager for the dysfunction of either of these teams. So I think that's I don't know. I really don't know. I think both of them are a product of bad seasons and pretty intricate situations.
I don't think David Bell was responsible for what happened last year at all. I think he gets like 2% blame for what went on last year. All of his players were out, and all of his players couldn't play baseball. Zach Taylor didn't get the Bengals ready to roll for Week 1 against the Patriots. Outside of that, in maybe the Ravens game when he ran 3 straight times, asterisk Burrow, audibled out of 1, ran it 3 straight times to settle for a 55-yarder against the Ravens. I don't think Zach Taylor has been too responsible for what's gone on here. The defense is terrible, absolutely woeful. But I think I don't know if Zach Taylor could get back in there and say, all right, guys, this is the week. We're going to do better this week. Let's clean it up. I don't think that was Zach Taylor. I don't think Zach Taylor should be here anymore. I think it's time for a culture change the same way it was for the Cincinnati Reds. It's just time to move on. They won't. But I think David Bell, David Bell shouldn't have got any blame for last season. 0. Zach Taylor deserves some blame for what's happened this year.
Yeah, David Bell was around for a while. I felt like people were just tired of David Bell. Zach Taylor, it seems like the people just went in on Zach Taylor all season. And we're talking like the season's done.
I did.
They got the Browns this week. Obviously, they got the Broncos a week after that, and they close out the regular season with the Steelers, and the playoffs still, there's still a shot. Nonetheless. But all right, let's step away for a few moments. Carson Palmer recently, made a stop on the herd with Colin Cowherd and says he's concerned about Joe Burrow. He's concerned about the Cincinnati Bengals. Is he truly concerned, or is he just continuing to push a narrative that he's been pushing for years since his exit out of Cincinnati? We'll talk about that. We have that soundbite for you, and you'll have our reaction and get your reaction when we come back. And we are back. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, and Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Before we get to this clip of Carson Palmer making a stop on the herd, I want to get your guys' take before this. The criticisms that Carson Palmer has had about the Bengals, not just in recent years, but from the time he exited Cincinnati to now, how much credence do you put into any of the takes that he has had? Do you just chalk it up to a former disgruntled employee, or is there validity in some of the things that he says? I'm curious from Bengals fans' perspectives, when he says things, do you guys listen? Do you guys think that he has a point, or do you just chalk everything he says up to he's just a former disgruntled employee, if you will?
I don't hold it a ton of weight. I mean, when have you seen Carson Palmer in the media since he retired from the league not bashing the Bengals? I think if he was often in the media talking about sports, it would probably hold a little bit more weight. And the fact that he just goes and does spots and, takes shots at the Bengals all the time, I think that kind of diminishes his point. But when you look at how Joe Burrow's career has gone so far and how Palmer's career went, I don't think you can, it's not too hard to find some similarities between the two of them. So I think it certainly holds a little bit of weight, but I think he ruins a lot of that validity when this is all he does is
it is his one bit. Carson Palmer is a quitter. He quit on the Bengals. He quit on his team. He quit on his teammates. And for that, he loses a lot of my respect. Saying that, you can't say he's completely wrong. You can't. I say it every show, but until it changes, this is what it's going to be. Joe Burrow has made the postseason twice in 5 years. I know he wasn't healthy for 2 of the years, but he played a lot of games in those 2 years, to be fair. The Bengals organization isn't one of the best organizations in football. I think everybody knows that.
Yeah.
I think everybody's well aware of it. Carson Palmer continuing to destroy the Bengals isn't, like Jacob just said, it's not, it doesn't enforce his take any more than it would if he didn't quit on the team. And
when I open my
quit in the
phone
city.
and see Palmer's face, I know what he's gonna say.
Correct.
Like there's no oh, what's Carson's take today? What it is.
But Bengals fans have this thing where and I think it's because there's a lot more casual fans with the Bengals, and that's okay. Football's a vastly more fun sport. So you have a bunch of people that maybe don't pay attention fully to what the Bengals organization does. I'm not just talking about games here. I'm talking about behind the scenes stuff. They've made those strides. They have an indoor practice bubble. They got bullied into it, right? People still make fun of the fact that the players walk across the street to get to their practice field. Silly stuff like that, and other organizations don't have to hear that noise. The Bengals don't have a lot of respect, I would say, as an organization. They're close to getting that. At least they were when they got to a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow. But every year that goes by where they don't make the playoffs with Joe Burrow, every year they don't win a Super Bowl, an AFC championship with Joe Burrow, is another year where Carson's points, unfortunately, get proven right. Because you have to win to shut Carson up. You have to win games to shut him up. And we were able to shut Carson up when we went to on that Super Bowl run. It was, I think, the week before we went to the Super Bowl, and Carson was yapping. Everybody's like, what are you talking about? I think he was saying, Joe Burrow should want to leave. Joe Burrow shouldn't want to be a Cincinnati Bengal after he wins this Super Bowl. And it's like, Carson, not everybody wants to quit like you guy. I mean, we're not all quitters. But at the same time, it's okay to be aware that the Bengals organization isn't very good historically, and as of lately, it's still. I mean, you have a ton of issues defensively, and not one time was it addressed. The trade deadline, you needed some help defensively, and your move was a guy who's had 4 handoffs, who's taken the ball 4 times, *5, but fumbled it, and the fumble was to Joe Burrow. The Bengals organization knows what's going on here, and they haven't addressed any of it. So from that perspective, from that angle, I sit here and I'm like, yeah, maybe Carson was right on a couple things. But I also think Carson's a quitter, and his opinion on the Bengals shouldn't be viewed the same as somebody else's who doesn't openly and drastically hate the organization as much as he does.
I mean, the most media Palmer's ever done in his life until this stretch is right before the draft when he was saying Burrow should demand to not go to Cincinnati and go to Miami and switch spots with Tua. So, yeah, I don't.
Carson could host a podcast. It's called the Bengals Suck Podcast. He would host it once a week.
Once a week? What? He'd run out of stuff.
Well, you're right. Once a month.
You think him and I could have a good podcast?
Yeah,
I think Carson Palmer.
I think him and I would be great tag team partners.
He should go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the title of the podcast is "How I Demanded a Trade and Almost Retired from the Bengals," and he just tells the story 3 times a week.
Yeah,
that's what he does on the Herd anyway.
Yeah, it's called Unlistenable with him and Skip Bayless on the Herd.
Oh, speaking of a co-host for Palmer.
Yeah.
Him and Shannon Sharp could do a killer.
They could.
How much the Bengals suck, Joe Burrow's fault podcast.
Yeah, dude, like Shannon Sharp. Even I sit back and I'm like, damn, Shannon, like, it's a little much.
He took
That's
a big time victory laugh on Sunday after the fumble. He tweeted at Dan Orlovsky, "Oh, this isn't Joe's fault." It's like, all right, come on, guy.
the thing that's always not interesting, but like Carson Palmer, any media outlet that has him on, they're not bringing him on to talk Bengals about, man, the Bengals looked good last week. Carson Palmer, your thoughts? Go look at the times that he's on. Now, I'm glad you brought up that the year they went to the Super Bowl, because you're right. You win, you get to a Super Bowl, you shut him up. No, it didn't. Like it's he used that platform to go on there and do what he does and to say what he does. But at the time when he first left Cincinnati, I think a lot of his reasons, I actually, a lot of people agreed with his reasons. I do believe when he left at the time, he was technically standing up for his teammates, saying, hey, like, what are we doing here? We're all trying to compete at the highest level, and the biggest competition that we have each week is not our opponent, but it's the organization. I give a lot of what he has to say a lot of credibility early on, but let it go, dude, because it's this many moons later. You've played for multiple organizations since then, and yet you just keep going back to that one to talk about that one. And it's like that's the only reason he keeps his clout alive is by just continuing to do hits like this. So he makes this. Oh, what you got?
Reed made a good point in the chat. Why is he mad? We did what he asked.
Yeah.
He demanded a trade, said he would retire. We traded him.
I don't blame Carson
Why
Palmer.
is he upset?
I don't blame Carson Palmer for hating the Bengals. Because I do think when
Oh,
he
and
was,
I'm not. I don't
when
want
he
you
was
guys
the
to think I'm
quarterback of
defending
the-
him. I'm not. I'm
when-
just saying early on I agreed with
No.
it. Now I'm like, let it go, dude. It's been a while.
When he was the quarterback of the Bengals, the organization was a joke, and that's a fact. That's more than documented. It always rubs me the wrong way when guys quit on their teammates and their city, like he did. But I understand it then. Now Jacob's right, Reed's right. What do you have to gain? What do you have to gain from still holding that grudge?
I guess
I'm the biggest.
you got a high school coaching job from it, maybe.
It's true. I'm the biggest grudge guy in the world. If you wrong me, I'm gonna remember it for the rest of my life.
Well, you write it down.
Maybe.
You write it down.
There's a list.
No, there's no list.
Am I on that list?
There's no list.
Well, you'd know if you were on that list.
No, there's
Sometimes
no
I
list.
wonder.
There's no list. My point being that it's more than fair for Carson Palmer to hate the Bengals back then. To keep continuing to hate them makes no sense to me, but whatever. If Carson wants to make that his life's mission, then he can feel free to do so. Everybody's able to do what they want now. Get on TikTok and just bash on the Bengals for 1 minute.
I think this whole thing would be viewed a lot differently if he was more successful in Cincinnati. And obviously then that situation probably wouldn't have happened, so then this doesn't even exist. But, had he not hurt his knee and went on a playoff run and things along those lines and been more successful in Cincinnati, I think there wouldn't be as much hate from Bengals fans to him because obviously you look now, he's not a top 3 quarterback in Bengals franchise history. Burrow's already passed him, Ken Anderson, Boomer Esiason. So the fact that a guy who's just kind of another quarterback in the lineage of the Bengals, especially the fact that he was the number 1 overall pick, was supposed to be, the prodigal son for the franchise, and it didn't really work out, and then now he just bashes us 24/7. I think that rubs Bengals fans the wrong way too, especially fans that are a little bit older than Elliott and I, who probably felt very similar to the way we did the night we drafted Joe Burrow when they drafted Carson Palmer. And to see that guy that was supposed to save your franchise now hate on it so publicly for the last however many years, that does have to be tough.
So Carson Palmer made a recent stop on the Herd with Colin Cowherd. And, of course, again, Carson Palmer, he understands the assignment. So does Colin Cowherd. There's a reason that Carson Palmer is on the show. It's not to, hey, let's bring some positive takes about why the Bengals should be excited about being in the playoff hunt. It's, no, if it bleeds, it leads. Let's talk about some drama. And that's what Carson Palmer's role is on these shows. Here's what Carson Palmer had to say on the Herd with Colin Cowherd regarding some of the concerns he has about Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Take a listen.
The 2 quarterbacks who I think are all-time talents, but they didn't get the great landing out of college, are you and Joe Burrow. And as I've watched Burrow, my heart goes out for him. They gave away Joe Mixon for a 7th rounder. They won't pay Jamar Chase, who's just incredible. And this is not to take a shot at Cincinnati, but you got into a situation there where you said, guys, enough is enough, and you're a loyal guy. Do you see, when you watch Burrow, do you see a little bit of that where you're like, boy, that kid is, your heart goes out a little bit for him?
Well, it's not what I see, from a skill standpoint or production on the field, because production on the field is second to none. I just see a frustration on his face, and that's what concerns me. It looks to be building, it looks to be waning and weighing on him. So that, I think the thing that jumps out at me is you can see the frustration on his face. It's tough to put up the numbers he's put up, to score the points they've put up and be in the situation they're in, which is on the outside looking in. Their playoff shot this year, unfortunately, looks to be slim to none, and you got to start thinking about next year. But I'm starting to see some frustration grow on Joe's face, and that's concerning.
Is it concerning when Tua Tagovailoa looks frustrated on the sideline? Is that concerning? Has it been concerning in recent years when Justin Herbert's looked frustrated on the sidelines? Has it been concerning when Josh Allen has looked frustrated on the sidelines in recent years when they've, underachieved? Was it concerning when Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs got off to a bad start last year? Was anyone saying, oh, man, Chiefs better be careful, Patrick Mahomes might leave? Like, what are we doing? Like, that's his hot take? The Bengals are 6-8. They're out of the playoffs as of right now, and may not be concerned. Joe Burrow looks frustrated. Well, of course he looks frustrated. Of course he does. Everyone on the sideline looks frustrated. Every single person on that sideline looks
Not
frustrated.
Jermaine Pratt.
What's that?
Not Jermaine Pratt.
Not Jermaine Pratt. I mean, he's
Career-high
getting
tackles,
dude. He's getting tackles. He's racking those up. But, like, what a weird take. And that's coming from me who has quite a laundry list of weird takes. But, like, that's his hot take. That's what you utilize. That's what you capitalized on with your airtime on the Herd, was to say a team that's 6-8, that Joe Burrow's the quarterback of, a team that had Super Bowl expectations, a team that has mightily underachieved. Your take is Joe Burrow looks frustrated. As I stated on yesterday's show, if you looked over on the sideline and he's smiling and he doesn't look frustrated, and him and Zach Taylor are holding hands, singing Kumbaya on the sideline, that's what you should be frustrated or concerned about. Not this. I'm not concerned that Joe Burrow looks frustrated on the sideline. I'm always looking for an angle to try to, upset you guys or maybe get you guys a little fired up. There's not, like, yes, I understand why he's frustrated. Everybody does. Like, this is just a very weird take. He's trying to make something out of nothing. Joe Burrow is upset that his team is underachieving. Holy smokes. Put that above the fold in the newspaper. Let that be breaking news on X, Twitter, every social out there. What a weird take by Carson Palmer, and that's coming from me. I just don't understand that. Like, I don't know what he's trying to stir up there. Actually, I do. Oh, man, I'm a little concerned. He looks frustrated. He's not frustrated because they're losing. He's frustrated because he doesn't want to be in Cincinnati. That's what I feel like he's insinuating. Am I wrong?
Yesterday you said that Burrow was being frustrated was an issue for Zach Taylor, right?
Yes.
That was the take. This take, I somewhat agree with. He has to. You can't smile on the bench. You can't smile. I think it's a little bit different in terms of yesterday, right? When we were talking about the frustration and the boiling point of what's going to happen with Joe Burrow, opposed to this type of frustration that Carson's talking about. It's the same type of thing, but at the end of the day, I do think Joe Burrow, to make him happy, I think you have to make a change in Cincinnati. Unless he wants to keep Taylor, which he very well might, and that's where I guess we'll disagree with, because I think if Joe Burrow, we all have said this, if Joe Burrow wanted out, if he wanted Zach Taylor out, he'd be out. But at the end of the day, you can't sit back and smile when you're 6-8 and you have all these turnovers. They had, 14 penalties? Yeah. How many penalties did they have in that Titans game? 14 penalties? So it's just a culmination of the season.
Yeah, I certainly don't think Burrow's frustration is at the organizational level, I guess I could say. I think his frustration at this point is the fact that they are 6-8. And we saw the John Boy breakdown that told us what he was saying in that argument with Taylor, and that's what one of the options that I think he gave, the one that I think he said was, we're 6-8. Basically, what is there to be happy about? And I think that's a very reasonable reaction to have on the sideline. I think that organizational disdain and hate for being here as a whole, where Carson inevitably got to at the end of his time here, I think that comes with year after year of the same kind of thing. If you roll out next year with a healthy Joe Burrow and you have the same kind of problems, I think that's when some of that, I don't want to be here type of thing can set in. But I don't think that happens in 1 year. And I think some of this pushing to the front office on how to deal with T. Higgins and how to deal with the offseason, I think he's going to have a lot of conversations with them in the offseason about how to attack this roster, and it's going to be pretty dependent on that for how he feels moving forward in Cincinnati.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. We'll wrap up the radio portion on the other side, a little college football to close it out. A lot of quarterback movement happening right now in the portal. Quarterback movement for teams who are preparing for meaningless bowl games, or teams who are not even eligible for a bowl. Even teams who are fighting for a national championship. Playoff teams have quarterbacks and star players bolting from their roster. We'll talk about all of that and more when we come back. Off the Bench presented, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, Elliot Rearing and Jacob Tissa with you here on this Tuesday. College football playoffs officially kick off this weekend. I've said this before. One of my favorite parts about the 12-team playoff is I used to hate in the 14 playoff. You'd have Selection Sunday on that first Sunday of December, and then football would just disappear for the top programs in the country. The football would just disappear for a month. We'll see you on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I hated that. One of my biggest, what I really wanted out of the 14 playoff was you have Selection Sunday, that first Sunday, in December, and then have the semifinals 2 weeks from then with bowl games sprinkled in between Selection Sunday and the semifinals. 2 weeks off between semifinals and title game with more bowl games sprinkled in between, and then the national championship on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, however they wanted to put that together. But now with the 12-team playoff, Selection Sunday last week, and then 2 weeks between that and the start to the playoffs, and that's what we're getting. But weather is always going to be a big talking point with this. I don't know how much you're paying attention to what the weather is going to be for some of these games because people's obsession with SEC teams, playing up north where it's cold.
Important to note that today Tennessee is practicing inside.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're
real
really
cold
preparing, for the elements when it's all said and done. But how about this? So the weather, updated weather forecast for kickoff of the playoff games is coming up weekend. South Bend will be 30 degrees and 30% chance of snow.
Love it. Love it.
Indiana will be fine, right?
Be
From a weather perspective. I don't, there.
Will Notre Dame be fine?
State College, 25 degrees, partly sunny.
Love that.
Little breezy.
There you go.
Little breezy.
Beautiful day.
A frigid weekend in Texas. Over in Austin, it'll be 60 degrees and mostly sunny.
They'll have the heaters rolling there.
I'm pretty sure. And then Tennessee, as they're warming up and practicing inside today, preparing for frigid temps in Columbus this Saturday night, it will be 25 degrees and mostly cloudy. It'll be slightly chilly on Saturday night when Tennessee comes to town. How about that?
I'm excited. I wish there was a little bit more snow. I think that would have been a fun piece of this first round for these northern matchups to have snow. In all honesty, the one with snow I don't really care about. I mean, making Indiana play in snow, that's not something we haven't seen before, so it doesn't really move the needle for me. Having SMU or Tennessee play in snow would have been a lot of fun, but doesn't look like we're going to get it. I think these games are going to be great. It's a real shame how they went about ticketing to kind of price students out of the stadium, which is a real shame because that's one of the things I was most excited for in the first round of the playoffs was that these students were going to be able to see their teams play on their home stadium for the first round of a playoff to win a national championship, which was a really, really cool thing. And sure, a lot of students will still get the chance to go, but basically across the board, at least I know for sure the 3 games on Saturday, Penn State, Texas, and Ohio State, all 3 chopped down their student sections to sell more tickets. So a real shame that that's the route that they're going. But yeah, I think all 3 of these games are going to be really good. I know the spreads are really high, 8.5, 11.5, 7.5, and then Friday night, Notre Dame, Indiana, 7 as well. All of them over a touchdown, which is a shame in the playoff. But I think this is what you're always going to get with this format. I don't think you're going to get close spreads unless, somehow you have a 3-loss Georgia losing the conference championship and playing Ohio State or something along those lines, some kind of crazy. But I think this is what we should be expecting in the first round of this playoff as we get into this 12-team format, double-digit touchdown spreads in the first round, and maybe an upset. But I would expect more of the favorites than not to take care of business this weekend.
I think it's like when a 16 plays a 1 to a lesser extent in college basketball, right? We usually know the outcome, but we want to see the opportunity there given to that lower seed. We want to give the opportunity to a team that maybe probably shouldn't have been in the playoff, take down a Penn State, right? Take down Notre Dame and South Bend. We want to see that opportunity happen. And I think that you're going to have at least one upset here. I don't know if it's going to be Clemson. I don't know if it's going to be Indiana.
I think there'll be one.
I think there will be one.
My guess is 3-1.
But I think even the chance of one is why you extend the playoff. And that's why. I think it's chaos. People like chaos. People like to see the upsets. And I think it's going to be a really good thing for. I know you hate it. I think it's a really good thing for college football.
I think there's ways that you can make it better, where you can make it so the 12 team isn't so bad. But I think the conference champion auto bids, the auto buys, really a lot of the things that go into this format, the way they have it now with the conference expansion and the schedule discrepancies, I just think there's too many flaws. There's a way to get the 12-team playoff to a way that it's okay. I just don't know that it's there yet. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to see these teams play on their campuses. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be really, really tough for a coach to lose at home in the first round of the playoffs.
I agree.
The upset, I like Clemson over Texas
so
right now. I like Clemson over Texas. I think there's some weird stuff happening in Texas right now. Some of it is not all because it's internal. I just think it's what this portal kind of presents. I think right now your starting quarterback is Quinn Ewers, and he should be focused 100% on helping Texas win their playoff game and go win a national championship. But right now, so many players are being forced to make decisions for not just the immediate future, but, for next season and after. Quinn Ewers is a guy that many people looked at and thought was going to be a top 10 draft pick this year and has fallen to getting grades right now in that second and third round range. I know we've talked about that slightly, but he's in a position where right now he has to make a decision of, is he going to, go to the draft? Is he going to go to the NFL after this year, regardless of the result of what happens in the playoff, and take a chance of being drafted in the second and third and making it work even if he's not ready? Or is he going to follow some of the scouts' suggestions of coming back to play another season in college? And let's say he does come back to play in college. There's a lot of reports out there that Texas may not want Quinn Ewers to come back, that they have been very patient with the Arch Manning experiment, kind of sitting behind him for a few years. Arch Manning, many believe, will be, for 100% sure, the starting quarterback for Texas next season, regardless of whether or not Quinn Ewers comes back. And if Quinn Ewers comes back, where could he potentially end up? We'll get to that part in a moment, but it is interesting hearing the distraction that is the portal for not just Quinn Ewers, but a lot of players who are having to make decisions on their future, all while trying to take care of business of preparing for their upcoming, whether it be a bowl game or even more importantly, a college football playoff game. College football, we opened up the show with it, has screwed this up. This is an absolute disaster. I feel bad for the kids that have to enter the portal now because they know that they're probably not going to have a shot with their current team next year. But also, they're probably playing a pivotal role in what their team is doing this year. Quinn Ewers is the starting quarterback for Texas and might have to make a tough decision about what his future is going to be in college or the NFL. Devin Brown, the backup quarterback for Ohio State, enters the transfer portal and somehow is still preparing to be the backup quarterback to help Ohio State go on to potentially win a national championship. But how distracted, how locked in is he? Well, he's preparing. And by the way, he could have. We saw what happened when Will Howard got knocked out against Michigan. We thought that Devin Brown was going to have to come in and finish that game for Ohio State. Obviously, Will Howard finished the game. Didn't look great after. But that very well could happen at any point throughout this month-long playoff. Devin Brown's going to play a pivotal role in that, if Will Howard can't be healthy. But how prepared will Devin Brown be? He's looking for his next spot. He's maybe talking to Bill Belichick at North Carolina. He's maybe Oregon wants it. Who knows? I don't know what the future of Devin Brown is going to be. Oregon is not even a possibility, by the way. But the bottom line is this has set up some of the weirdest scenarios. Let's say the Bengals sneak into the playoffs this year. Imagine T. Higgins already sitting down with other teams talking about what he's going to bring to the table for them, all while attending practice, helping the Bengals prepare. That would be the comparison to what's happening in college right now. It's a disaster.
Are you not allowed to stay on the team if you enter it?
You're allowed to.
You're allowed to stay on the team even if you enter the transfer portal?
Some playoff teams are allowing their players to stay. Some are not.
Is Franklin allowing his guy to stay or no?
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. So Bro Prabula is who you're talking about, right?
Correct.
The backup quarterback number 9. He's not just a normal backup quarterback either. They use him in a lot of, read option sets. They use him sort of the way the Steelers use Justin Fields.
Okay.
In their 2 quarterback set. So he's a big part of their offense. He enters the transfer portal because this window is open now and closes in 2 weeks. And if you don't enter this window, you can't play in spring ball at your next destination. So if you're going to go be the starting quarterback somewhere, or battle to be the starting quarterback somewhere, you need to play in spring ball. You have to get in the system and learn the offense. So he enters the portal with the intention of staying at Penn State through the playoff. At least that's what's reported. This isn't out of Bo's mouth. This is just a bunch of different reports. With the intention of staying at Penn State. He then receives multiple $1 million plus offers to go be a starting quarterback elsewhere. Those offers contingent that he steps away from Penn State.
Oh, no.
If you stay with Penn State, we pull the money type of offers. So he didn't have a choice. And this isn't just happening with quarterbacks. Jalen Mbakwe at Alabama, he a freshman corner this year, the biggest recruiter for Alabama in last year's recruiting cycle, player of the year in the state of Alabama last year, grew up a Crimson Tide fan. He entered the transfer portal yesterday. Now there's some rumors that he could potentially be coming back, but he was offered $1 million in tampering from Ole Miss. To go to Ole Miss, be guaranteed a starting spot on both sides of the ball. So now you're guaranteeing kids that haven't played meaningful time in college a chance to play on both sides of the ball for 7 figures, and they're leaving their schools that they've wanted to be at and clearly want to be a part of to go chase that money elsewhere, and you really can't blame them.
No.
It's life-changing money, and this is the system that they're playing in. So I think there's a big problem, and I think the problem is a very simple fix, at least big picture with this stuff. Eliminate this window.
Yeah.
And then people say, oh, you're punishing transfers. They won't be able to play spring ball. Okay.
Yeah.
Punish the transfers.
Or adjust the spring ball rules.
I don't think it's the worst thing for a guy that's transferring from a school to another to be punished. To miss a spring ball portion, to have a little bit of an uphill battle to play the next year.
It's less severe than what it used to be. Oh, now you miss spring versus missing an entire season before. And from a business perspective, I will say this. If I'm a high-profile athlete on any team, like if I'm Jeremiah Smith, if I'm anybody, I think it would be dumb not to enter the portal every year. It doesn't mean you're leaving, but I would honestly, if I'm any of these athletes,
value.
I'm not saying I would like, as a fan, I'm not saying I would like that. I would dislike it. But from a business perspective, It'd basically be like the opt-out to contracts to go test the free agent market, and if you like what you get there, then come back. Basically, a qualifying offer. It would be basically that. But if I'm a high-profile athlete, I enter the portal after every year. Doesn't mean you're actually intending to leave. It's just letting your teams know, hey, I'm entering the portal. I want to see. I came in with this NIL value as a freshman. And I'm excited about what I'm going to bring to the table next year. But, hey, if I enter the portal now, I have a whole other window of opportunities NIL-wise. Doesn't mean I'm leaving you, Ohio State. It just means, hey, based on what they're offering me, here's what you need to offer me to keep me. I would enter the portal every single year if I'm any of these high-profile athletes. Not every single one. I think it'd be kind of silly, for no reason to do it. But I think it would be silly not to, just based on some of these numbers that are being floated out there. Dylan Raiola, who is he has not entered the portal. There was a rumor that he had. I think I got on a fake tweet not too long ago. But I just
This is a dangerous time.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So
People are getting there's too many graphic softwares out there. People can make these transfer portal graphics.
Well, I saw Williams.
I saw that 5 times today. My heart's beating out of my chest.
I might have favored it thinking it was real, but I was like, well, Jake, let it be known if it's real or not right off the bat.
Yeah.
But Dylan Raiola could reportedly command an insane amount of money if he enters the transfer portal. There are reportedly several SEC and Big Ten teams, by the way, Nebraska, Big Ten team, that would be willing to offer over $12.5 million to land Raiola as a transfer. If I'm Dylan Raiola, I enter the portal. Nebraska doesn't mean I'm leaving, but if I want to follow the rules and talk to these teams, I'm entering the portal, going to find out what these teams are willing to give me, come back and say, hey, they're willing to offer me this. What can you do? If you can't do that, I'm sorry, I got to bounce. But if you can match that, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. But $12.5 million, and we're going to say that this kid's unloyal if he leaves. Nebraska.
Well, I'm okay saying Dylan Raiola is unloyal. He went to 4 different high schools and had 3 different college commitments.
You know what? Yeah, I got nothing for that. I got nothing for that. But that wraps it up.
But you're absolutely right in that sense. You got to take the money, save your family.
doubt.
I mean, that's generational wealth to play college football, and there's no guarantee you're getting to the pros, regardless of how good of a recruit you are.
So we're going to pick up with it. We'll continue on with this on the YouTube side. But as far as radio, that wraps it up for us until tomorrow. This has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
Welcome back in. No more ESPN 1410, just here on YouTube. Talking about the transfer portal in college football, and a picture that really sums that up to a T is Bear Alexander, the original 5-star recruit, committed to Georgia, grew up in Georgia, such a diehard Dogs fan that he has a big old G tattooed on that bicep. But as you can tell, he's since transferred. He's in the portal right now visiting Penn State. There he is on his visit to Penn State. Casey, if you could scroll up a little bit on the picture, you'll notice something else, that his profile picture, that's a USC Trojan. So he committed to Georgia out of college, played a year there, then transferred to USC for the last 2 years. Now in the portal again, so you kind of get to see these full mashups of all these logos. There was another killer graphic yesterday. TJ Finley entered the portal and committed to Tulane. That graphic had 6 schools across the bottom. 6 schools. LSU, Auburn, Texas State, and then he committed to Tulane. There was one more, Western Kentucky in there. Just an unbelievable jet-setting the country. And look, if you're a bad quarterback and you have no chance to make it to the league, go see the world.
Oh, yeah.
I'd go see one on the West Coast, one on the East Coast, one in the South, one in the Big Ten. Let's do it. Let's see the beautiful country.
I like how these recruiting like On3 and others, their graphics for when these teams, like when these players agree to go to a school, their graphic looks like during COVID with contact tracing. I mean, it shows every stop that they've been along the way. So you know exactly where they've been every step of the way and where they've ended up. I think right now players need to treat, they need, as far as tattoos go for players, they need to treat this the way that you should do it with, relationships. Never have your significant other tattooed on any part of your body, and that goes for any school that you play for, because this is no longer being with the same person for the rest of your life or playing for the same school for your entire college career. It's absolutely insane. That is such a weird thing to do.
Famously, obviously before the transfer portal era, but in the mid-2000s, Reuben Foster, an All-American linebacker for Alabama, he had an Auburn AU right in the middle of his biceps. So this has been going on in sports for a while. So I always just think it's crazy. If you're a big enough believer in a program to get it tattooed on your body, I would imagine you're not going to transfer. But who knows?
You can't transfer once you get that.
Transfer.
It should be a rule. It should be in the bylaws. And once you get the tattoo, you gotta ride with it.
You're locked in.
You're just locked in.
That's the no regrets.
Yeah.
No regrets. As far as that goes. What's up?
I was gonna add one quick thing before you add your thing. So last night, and I saw Jacob send it to me right before I sent it in there as well in our little show group chat. But last night there was an assault.
There was an assault.
There was an assault. Adam Schefter tweeted out that Sacramento State is in discussions to hire former Pro Bowl quarterback Mike Vick as its new head coach. Sacramento State plans to move up to FBS, building a new stadium, and has over $50 million in NIL. Gottlieb says, "Jesus, Shefty, edit what agents tell you. 0.0% chance Sac State has $50 million in NIL." Schefter goes back and says the Sac-12 leading the school's NIL efforts already announced it has reached its initial goal of raising $50 million in NIL funds to strengthen the school's case for an invitation to the Pac-12 or Mountain West Conference. Adam Schefter then adds onto that tweet, "Jesus, Doug, a 7-game losing streak and last place in the Horizon League. Less time on social media and more time in the gym."
We had to know this was going to happen to old Dougie at some point, right?
Poor Doug. How long is that going to last? A year? 2 years? Can't be more than 2 years.
And by the way, we knew this was going to happen, but it would be better if he would just shut up.
Yeah,
and I get it. He's a sports talk show host.
Yeah, it's the issue. He can't shut up.
But it doesn't mean. But it also doesn't mean he has to go at people on social media the way that he does, because is he not self-aware of where, he's putting his team in a bad spot. You have Adam Schefter dunking on your basketball team. There are innocent casualties that are just being knocked out because, all his players just got dunked on social media, and they had nothing to do with that exchange whatsoever. I don't feel bad for him. I'm not even mad at Adam Schefter. I know we like to beat up on him on the show. I loved what he did. But yeah, Doug Gottlieb, I think Green Bay plays at Wright State on early January. I think here in a few weeks they'll be at the Nutter Center. I'm wondering if they'll win a game between now and then. Yeah. But yeah, we should have figured that it was going to be a distraction at some point.
For sure.
I'm actually surprised they are bad. They went out and got quite a few good players. They had a couple 3-star kids that came in. Just not shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess you're right. We do have some breaking news
before
we get into the Devin Brown conversation. The Bengals-Broncos game, at least according to the NFL website. Yeah, we don't steal bits here.
Never.
At least according to the NFL website, the Bengals-Broncos game in Week 17 will be played at 4:30 p.m.
What was it originally?
It's the TBD Saturday-Sunday weekend.
Okay.
So had no original listed time. There were some rumors that it could potentially be the night game. Not a lot of great games that weekend, but again, according to the NFL website, Cardinals-Rams is going to be the Saturday night game. Sorry, not on Sunday. It's going to be 4:30 on Saturday, December 28th is the listing for that game.
Okay.
Obviously, look, Bengals should beat Cleveland, no doubt about that. That game, is that going to be hopefully there's playoff games for the Bengals, but if not, is that going to be the last big game that you guys get geared up for? They beat Cleveland, Will you get super jacked for that Broncos game?
Yeah, well, if they
would
beat
have to
Cleveland,
be.
if they beat Cleveland, that matters for sure because you obviously have to win out. But how jacked I am for that Broncos game comes down to Thursday night. The Chargers have to beat the Broncos for us to really have a good spot going into these last couple of weeks. Otherwise, we need the Chargers to lose out, which would be, what do we say, 5 losses in a row at that point to end the season. Yeah. So Chargers winning on Thursday night is monumental for the Bengals. And if they win that one and the Bengals take care of business against the Browns, then, yeah, I'm going to be pretty all in for this Broncos game. And then especially beating the Steelers, I'll always root to beat the Steelers. I hate the Steelers.
The Steelers win the division with a win this week. So we want this, right?
And a Ravens loss or just a win?
Well, they play the Ravens. Right?
Oh, then yeah. So just a win.
So if they beat the Ravens, they win the division, which means the Steelers wouldn't be playing for anything that final week. And then the Chiefs, they have a tough schedule. If they play the Texans, the Steelers, and then the Broncos. If they just lose one of those first 2 games, either this week against the Texans, which they're underdogs in, or they lose to the Steelers on Christmas, then that final week they would have to play because if they were to lose it, they would no longer have the 1 seed to the Buffalo Bills, assuming the Bills win out, which they will.
You see who they play?
Well, they'd have to
the
lose.
Patriots twice and the Jets. The Bills are winning out.
The Chiefs would have to lose twice.
But that's what I'm saying.
They have to play Week 18.
But that's what I'm. Well, how the Bills are.
The
what,
Chiefs
what's
are.
the Bills'
The
record?
Chiefs are 13-1. The Bills are 11-3.
Correct, but I'm saying if the Chiefs lose,
You're saying so they play the starters.
They
in
would
Week 18,
have to play.
So not throw it as a loss.
Correct.
I got you. Yeah.
They would have to play. They would have to
Yep.
play in that final game.
Yeah, which would be big.
So again, you can't look for. You can't. You're looking so far ahead is kind of silly.
It is
with this,
funny
but-
that we finally reach a point in the season where Bengals fans are, at least some of them, rooting for the Broncos against the Colts. And at least at the start of that game, it was like, oh, here's the Bo Nix regression that we've been waiting for. So it was just seemed like a big practical joke on Bengals fans, but they pulled it out. So we stay alive. Hopefully that regression happens this week and the Chargers take care of business.
Yep.
Sean Payton, the coach of the year?
No, I think the coach of the year is distantly Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, I don't think it's close.
In Minnesota. I think he should be running away with it.
What was their win total? 6 or 7?
Something like that.
Yes, it has to be him, right? But I also see the argument.
I think Payton's done a really, really good job.
I think it's so. Is it between those two though? Is there so if you had to rank coach of the years?
Can you give it to Tomlin?
I would say Tomlin.
What an unbelievable year for Tomlin in Pittsburgh.
I think Harbaugh could be on the list.
Harbaugh's done a good job, no doubt.
But I think that's
Harbaugh's team got worse heading into this season, and they've won significantly more games.
I mean, if the Lions lock up the 1 seed with these injuries, I'd give it to Campbell.
Yeah, I think there's a couple guys.
Week 18 Lions Vikings should be for coach of the year. With what both teams have done this year, whoever wins the NFC North gets coach of the year.
You could argue McDermott too.
For sure. They lost a lot.
Bills lost everybody. Don't have a defense.
DeMar Hamlin's a starter.
still able to win, and it's I don't know. I think there's a lot of coaches that could win it this year. I really do.
That's what I mean. It's such a tight race. You can make legit arguments for so many of them, and maybe it's my dislike for the Steelers. And even though I think you guys can back me up, I think I've been very complimentary of the Steelers this year, but I still don't look at what Mike Tomlin has done. I think what it'll be used against the fact that he does this every year, what might be used against him, right?
Yeah. No, that's why I was like, can we vote for him?
And if Russell Wilson, had he done this, and to be fair, had he done this with Justin Fields, I think it'd be more impressive than doing it with Russell Wilson.
I thought Justin Fields was a better quarterback going into the season, so I can't change now.
So yeah,
I mean, I can't. Maybe they were 4-2. They benched Justin Fields and got better. I thought he was crazy.
Cleveland's gonna get him next year. It's gonna piss me off.
Fields.
It's gonna piss me off.
Go get Russ. He's a free agent too.
Oh yeah, that's the Browns collect overpriced quarterbacks like Pokemon cards at this point if they do that. Did you see they are bringing Deshaun back?
Yeah, and he's going to compete for the starting job.
Yep. That's why I think people are overreacting to that slightly. And I'm not defending this.
I just
whatsoever.
think you always were going to do that.
You have him for 3. Yeah, that was my point. And had they said he's our starter, then I think the reaction's fair. But the verbiage has changed. He's going to come back to compete for the starting job, and I think that with that language right there, that's not doing anything other than a guy that you have on the roster for the next 3 years with $45 million a year, fully guaranteed money, or 50 or whatever the number is. Of course, he was going to be back next year. But and I've said this before. A couple weeks ago, I said I didn't want the Browns to blow it all up. I want them to blow it all up. I want them to blow it all up. Your ceiling over the next 3, look how good we thought Jameis. This is the full Jameis experience. But this is what the Browns will get for the next 3 years if they decide not to play Deshaun Watson moving forward. You're going to get the Joe Flacco, you're going to get the Jameis Winston type quarterbacks that have done enough in the league to prove why they're still in the league, but then they show you why they have never been, why they're not able to land long term with the team moving forward. Your ceiling is going to be a 9-win team.
Yeah.
Moving for the next 3 years during the Deshaun Watson contract there, you're going to be a 9-win team ceiling on a good year. I'd rather them just get rid of Myles Garrett, get rid of everybody, get all those picks, and start use the next 3 years where you're in cap hell to begin with. Use the next 3 years to rebuild during that stretch where you're going to be limited anyways, so that when that contract does come off the books, now you have young, established talent. You have now money to go spend and then take off from there. They're not going to do it. They're going to be stubborn, and I think that now we're going to have to watch. Not you guys. You guys are fine with this, but now I have to watch a team that has a 9-win ceiling for the next 3 years. Then strip it all down to the studs after the Deshaun Watson contract and start all over from there. So that's, there's no positivity coming in sight right now for this Browns team. I thought they could coach around it. I thought they could navigate around it with a cash-rich owner. But what I'm seeing with Jameis, a lot of excitement, but all the limitations, those will always exist no matter what quarterback. They get Justin Fields next year. There'll be some excitement. He's going to make some plays. They're going to win some football games, but they ain't winning anything. They're not winning anything of substance, no matter who's at quarterback, until they can get a quarterback on a rookie deal and spread out dollars elsewhere, and start over.
Yeah.
I'd much rather see them do that.
Unless you're picking high enough that you're in love with a quarterback on the board this year, I would think about starting Deshaun. Why not? If he's bad and he loses you games, that's good. If he's good, that's good. So I don't know unless there's a quarterback you love as a rookie that's there on the board, I would take other pieces, try to fill this roster, and honestly dribble out the clock. And I know that's probably not what guys like Myles Garrett want to hear. The limited amount of star players that are on that team, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to dribble out the clock for 2 or 3 years in the prime of their career, but maybe that's when you have trade conversations with some of those guys. Because I think going all in, quote unquote, on a rebuild and tearing it down with Deshaun Watson still there, taking money off the books, I think it's a waste of time. I don't think there's any reason to, half go in on a rebuild when you're spending $40 million on a quarterback that you don't even want to play.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be your backup quarterback in a rebuild because you'd rebuild around a rookie quarterback. So I wouldn't have any desire to do that if I was a Browns fan. Obviously, it would expedite the process, and maybe it'd be more fun to have a rebuild, some more things to hold on to. But I just think it's a waste of time, and you'd be setting that rookie quarterback up for failure. I think you have to find a way out of this Deshaun Watson contract or get to a point where you can cut him for a reasonable loss, and that's when you start your rebuild, because otherwise you're playing the game with too many extra things, holding you back.
All right. Do you have something to add to that?
Not on that, but bowl game tonight. Who do we got? Memphis versus West Virginia.
I think Rich
9
Rod.
p.m.
Yeah, Rich Rod's turning around. Did you watch last night's bowl game? It was really good.
Was there a bowl game last night?
Yeah.
What bowl game was last night? There wasn't a bowl game
Or was
last
it
night.
2 nights ago?
There was one December 14th.
There was one 2 days ago.
December 14th, the
Or maybe it was
Saturday,
3
there was
days
a bowl
ago.
game.
I thought there was one this week.
There's just December 14th and then.
Oh, it was FCS playoffs.
Yeah,
It wasn't a
that's what
bowl
it was.
game. Yeah.
I didn't watch that, no.
No, I didn't
But
expect
tonight, we have Memphis versus West Virginia in Frisco, Texas, 9 p.m. The Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl.
That's a good one.
Who you got in this one?
That's a good one.
What's the line?
I don't know. You're going to make.
Let's just go with West Virginia. I'm
going to go with Memphis, whatever the spread
The
is.
Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl?
Yeah, it's one of the more.
That's a good one.
It's one of the
I
more
like that one.
historic
Have you ever
ones.
had a Scooters Coffee?
No.
They're
I've not.
good.
I've never had coffee.
They're good.
What about.
Really?
Never had coffee.
That's
What
crazy.
are your thoughts
Memphis
on
-6.
What are your thoughts on the Pop-Tart trophy having an actual toaster in it?
That rocks.
When the trophy is more interesting than the actual game, I guess that's a win.
That game's gonna be sick.
Who's in it?
Miami. Cam Ward's playing.
So he is going to
He
play?
is playing.
Fair enough.
That's one thing I do think. We talk about the transfer portal, how much it's ruining college football right now. NIL has made people play in bowl games.
Yeah.
Which rocks. Stop opting out of bowl games. I absolutely love that these star players are playing in bowl games basically all across the country except for Michigan. So good cultures.
But that's more of a recent change, right?
I would say in the last year or two.
Recently.
Yeah.
That, and that definitely.
Bryce and Will did it when they were projected 1 and 2 in the draft. Bryce Young and Will Anderson. They played in the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State. That was 3 years ago now, and I think that kind of started a push of these aren't meaningless if you value playing with your teammates one more time.
Yeah,
so,
like Shador and
Travis playing, Milrow and all those guys at Bama playing. I think it's really, really good for the sport that these players are playing in their bowl games.
So if that's the new trend, then what I would really like to see, because I've seen this been pitched before and there's discussions about it, an NIT, college football
Now
NIT
I think you're
version.
pushing the envelope a little bit. I don't know if these guys are signing up to play 3 more games.
Yeah, but what if you did a 4-team NIT
Yeah.
little playoff?
Look,
type
it'd be
thing?
fun, and I'd watch it. I just
You'd get your Michigan, your Alabama, your Miami, or I still think you would get interesting enough programs to maybe get them to play 2 more games.
it would get great ratings. But I don't know that players. We just got them to play in 1 game. I don't know if we can get them to play in 3 or 4.
But that's the most college athletics
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, that's the most NCAA thing. I guess technically it's not them though. It's
No.
powers that be. All right, well, wrap it up with this. Box lunch, Chatterbox Bengals, Chatterbox. Anything we have coming
Chatterbox
up this
Bengals
week?
tonight. Chatterbox Bengals tonight at 6 p. We'll go back through the film of the last game. Back-to-back wins. Feels
Yeah.
good. Been a long time since back-to-back
Only the second
wins.
2-game winning streak of the season. Is that right?
That's right. It's hard to have more than 2-game winning streaks when you only have 6 wins.
6 wins, yeah.
Yeah, no.
What are
I
you
mean,
guys
I guess
excited
hypothetically
about?
you could
It's
have 3.
effing embarrassing. What are you excited about? It's
Yeah.
effing embarrassing.
No, it is. It is. And that's the thing that I don't know that you guys might not know, but the wins are somehow usually worse to break down the film because you don't just want to hold on to the good plays. So you just kind of move those to the
You're like,
side.
what the hell was that?
Yeah, and you just kill the bad plays. So we'll have them ready to rock and roll for you guys tonight about 6 p. It'll be a fun show.
There you go. Box lunch at all this week today. What do you guys
Wednesday.
have today?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
There you go. All right. Well, that wraps it up for us. We'll do it again tomorrow. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.